They appeared to be the ideal couple, a young wife and her charming husband, whose love story began with chance meetings in college and mutual prayers. However, beneath their external unity, there were secrets that were never openly discussed. Within their secluded circle, unusual rules, prophetic expectations, and ritualistic practices took hold, confusing personal boundaries. Then abruptly everything collapsed, leaving only unresolved questions. This is the story of how faith and power intertwined with a mania for control, and what can occur when life unfolds in a world transformed by one person's vision. Bethany Deon was born and raised in Texas in a large Christian family, one of 5 children. Her parents adhered to traditional religious values, and from her earliest years, they aimed to instill in their children both faith and a sense of duty before God. It was within this environment of care and strict moral guidance that Bethy's character was shaped calm, serious, and reserved. From an early age, Bethany displayed clear intellectual talents. She eagerly turned to books, choosing to immerse herself in reading rather than partake in the typical activities of her peers. By the age of 13, she had read nearly all of Charles Dickens' works. She was able to discuss his novels with a depth rarely found even in adults. Her love of literature was paired with a talent for writing. Bethany enjoyed creating her own pieces, and from an early age felt an urge to express her thoughts through words. As she grew older, this passion evolved into a consistent discipline. She kept a personal blog, posting pages of prose that were both stylistically mature and emotionally rich. These writings, which combined seriousness, irony, and reflections on faith, revealed a complex inner life. By her early 20s, Bethany had amassed nearly 200 pages of writing, proof not only of her talent, but also of her desire to understand life more profoundly. Bethany dreamed of teaching at a university while also writing her own books, but her ambitions went beyond just career aspirations. Even as a teenager, she imagined a simple yet harmonious life in a home nestled in nature with a husband and children by her side. Her longing for marital happiness was strengthened by a personal ritual. She prayed regularly for her future spouse and even wrote letters addressed to him in the future. These letters were her declaration of faith, evidence that she believed God would one day bring her the man with whom she would share both spiritual and personal aspirations. Tyler Deon was born in 1985 into a deeply religious family. From an early age, he demonstrated not only musical talent, but a profound interest in spiritual matters. His artistic nature and desire to stand out combined with an obsession for fantastical and apocalyptic worlds. He drew inspiration from the Chronicles of Narnia, Harry Potter, and religious texts that spoke of prophecy and the end times. Over time, these influences became intertwined with his own sense of destiny, a belief that he was chosen for something greater. In 2005, Tyler enrolled at Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas, a school known for its academic rigor and strong faith-based traditions. It was here that his personality truly began to take form. His natural charisma and ability to speak passionately about spiritual topics set him apart. He participated in musical worship events and theological discussions, but he frequently criticized the campus prayer groups, claiming they lacked true depth and spiritual authenticity. Tyler's journey took a significant turn when he met Bethany at Southwestern. She was captivated by his energy, his intensity, and his ability to spark people's imaginations. For Bethany, who had grown up in a devout Christian environment and longed for a deeper understanding of faith, Tyler's words struck a chord. She began attending his gatherings, and over time, she came to view him as her spiritual guide. In the summer of 2007, Tyler had what he later described as a vision. On July 21st, while standing in line for a Harry Potter book release, he claimed he received a divine calling, a mission to alter the spiritual climate of the university. He believed he had been chosen to assemble a group of people whose prayers could change the future, not only of the campus, but of something far greater. Among those he selected was Bethany. After that, Tyler began to form a circle around himself. He drew strong parallels between his mission and the stories he cherished. The Chronicles of Narnia reminded him that ordinary people could be warriors in a battle between good and evil. Harry Potter to him symbolized the eternal struggle between light and darkness. Rick Joyner's The Final Quest reinforced his belief that he was a prophet of the last days. Bethany was one of the few who truly believed in him. She was drawn not only to his charisma, but also to his ability to intertwine popular narratives with spiritual teachings. For her, joining Tyler's group felt like the next natural step in her own spiritual journey and her purpose. But indeed, it was a clear indication that she had discovered her true path. In 2009, after completing her studies at Southwestern University, Tyler and his close-knit group made a decision. Instead of separating and seeking individual careers, they would relocate together to Kansas City. Bethany accompanied them. She aligned with Tyler's vision and perceived the move as the fulfillment of her calling. The relocation to Kansas City was motivated by a desire to engage in the One Thing internship, a program associated with the International House of Prayer, commonly referred to as a HOP. The organization, founded by Pastor Mike Bickle, is widely recognized for its continuous prayer sessions and its strong focus on apocalyptic theology. For Tyler, this was not simply another opportunity. It served as confirmation of his vision. He viewed IHOP-KC as a launching pad to establish his own spiritual movement. From that vision, a close-knit group emerged known simply as the Community. The group settled in a peaceful suburb just outside Kansas City. In the Grandview area, men and women lived separately. Bethany was assigned to the women's house where she, like the others, adhered to a rigid set of rules. Tyler exercised control over nearly every aspect of daily life, from prayer schedules to household decisions. It became evident early on that personal initiative was discouraged, and any departure from his directives was considered disobedience. One of Tyler's initial major directives was to sever ties with family. He asserted that relatives could hinder spiritual growth and jeopardize the group's divine purpose. As a result, many members cut off contact with their loved ones, sometimes for extended periods. Bethany, whose family had always played a central role in her life, found herself ensnared in this emotional isolation, gradually drifting away from those she had once relied on for support. Tyler also demanded that members relinquish their professional ambitions. Those who had once aspired to careers in science, medicine, or the arts were instructed to abandon their dreams. Instead, they took on low-wage jobs in retail and service industries. All of their earnings were pulled into a communal fund, which Tyler oversaw. He regarded himself as exempt from working. His role, he claimed, was solely to focus on spiritual leadership. To solidify his control, Tyler introduced what he referred to as marriage prophecies. He asserted that God had revealed to him the specific pairings for each individual, and it was he alone who decided when people should enter relationships or terminate them. Personal lives ceased to be private. Every romantic relationship became subject to Tyler's interpretation of divine will. Bethany was no exception. Her own aspirations for marriage were overshadowed by Tyler's decisions, which he framed as sacred guidance rather than manipulation. A clear illustration of the group's stringent control was the case of Bo Harrington. In the fall of 2010, Bo was labeled as rebellious and placed in isolation. For 8 months he remained in the men's house, cut off from all communication with others. It wasn't until the spring of 2011, when leadership at the International House of Prayer became aware of the situation, that he was released and encouraged to reintegrate with the group under more humane conditions. By this time, the community had evolved into a closed system with a rigid hierarchy. Officially, it maintained its affiliation with a HOP, but in practice, it functioned as an independent group, completely under Tyler's control. As the community became more entrenched in Kansas City, Tyler Deon's life grew increasingly complex, a web of contradictions under mounting scrutiny. Publicly, he presented himself as a spiritual mentor, preaching morality and discipline. But within the group, relationships were far more complicated, characterized by ritualized behaviors and hidden intimacy. His relationship with Bethany was intense, full of symbolism and emotional depth, but devoid of physical closeness. Despite their public connection and small gestures of affection, their relationship remained celibate. Instead of traditional dates, they would bake bread together, an act they considered sacred, a symbol of unity and preparation for a future marriage. But there was no physical contact, no romantic fulfillment. For Bethany, this became a profound emotional struggle. Her dreams of a loving, intimate partnership clashed with Tyler's refusal to move beyond symbolic rituals. At the same time, there was another reality, one carefully concealed from outsiders. Tyler was engaging in intimate relationships with several men within his group. This was known only to a small circle of his closest followers and was never openly acknowledged. In public, Tyler preached vehemently against same-sex relationships, condemning them as sinful. The contradiction between his public condemnation and his private actions was glaring and deeply unsettling. Within the community, they practiced what Tyler referred to as group embraces. He portrayed these as a form of spiritual unity, claiming that through prolonged physical touch, the group could achieve a kind of supernatural harmony. But in practice, these sessions blurred the lines between emotional and physical boundaries, often becoming a tool for Tyler to assert control and foster dependency. These so-called rituals served a dual purpose. They reinforced his authority under the pretense of spiritual discipline, while allowing him to fulfill personal desires without facing public scrutiny. Members of the group, deeply influenced by Tyler's teachings, accepted these behaviors as part of their service, rarely questioning the motivations behind them. Bethany, convinced they were destined for marriage, believed their lack of physical intimacy was due to their shared spiritual mission. Her elevated status within the group only reinforced this belief, enabling her to rationalize Tyler's behavior as a form of personal sacrifice for a higher calling. For Tyler, however, the relationship was largely symbolic, a means to solidify his image as a leader rather than an expression of emotional closeness. He lived a double life, publicly advocating purity and moral discipline, while privately engaging in secretive encounters with men, and orchestrating rituals he presented as spiritual practices. This hypocrisy created a world of double standards and deepened the group's dependence on him, stripping members of the clarity needed to question what was truly happening. In February 2012, Tyler proposed to Bethany, presenting the engagement as the fulfillment of long-standing promises and the result of deep prayer. For Bethany, it was the answer she had been waiting for. Within the community, the engagement wasn't seen as a personal milestone, but as part of a collective calling. The preparations for the wedding became a group project led by Tyler himself, with most decisions made by him and family input kept to a minimum. The wedding was scheduled for August 18, 2012 and carried a strong religious tone. The focus was on prayer, spiritual union, and the couple's shared mission. Though Bethy's family and friends were present, many felt like outsiders. They noticed that Tyler was surrounded by his inner circle, and the ceremony itself felt more like a gathering than a celebration. Several of Bethy's close friends later admitted they felt no joy that day. One even confessed to having a terrible gut feeling. Despite the calm exterior, many guests left feeling deeply unsettled. Their roles in the event reduced to mere observers. Bethany, for her part, tried to remain composed. She believed that marriage would resolve the emotional strain and bring her closer to the family life she had always dreamed of. Tyler, however, remained distant and formal. Even on the wedding day, he avoided affection, claiming it was important to maintain spiritual focus. Most of the witnesses and organizers were members of the community. While Bethy's relatives were largely sidelined, the vows focused on service and shared purpose with very few personal declarations. Tyler kept the details of their honeymoon a secret right up until the flight. It wasn't until they arrived at the airport that Bethany learned they were headed to Costa Rica. At first, everything seemed normal, settling in, making plans for sightseeing, and talking about their future together. But every time Bethany tried to get closer to her husband, she was met with sharp rejection. Kisses and hugs were cut short with irritation. Tyler claimed that physical closeness distracted from the higher purpose and interfered with his spiritual sensitivity. Their wedding night never took place. For Bethany, this was a shock. She tried to start conversations, asked for an explanation, and even suggested they set aside religious discussions just to enjoy their time together. Instead, she received vague answers, abrupt subject changes, and emotional distance. Left alone for hours, she turned to reading the Twilight series. The books became a way to escape her growing anxiety, filling the empty time when her exchanges with Tyler were reduced to household matters. When they returned from the trip, Bethany came back exhausted and detached. Outwardly, everything seemed normal. Photos, stories about the trip, polite smiles. But inside, the honeymoon had left a void. She lacked both the comfort of intimacy and any clear explanation for the rejection. The marriage, which was intended to mark the beginning of a new life, began with the denial of its most personal aspect. It marked the onset of changes that could no longer be ignored. After they returned, their marriage failed to find stability. Bethany moved into Tyler's basement room, but soon began spending increasing amounts of time at the women's house. At times staying there for several days, her roommates noticed her anxiety and low spirits. When they inquired about it, she deflected, stating she needed personal space or felt overwhelmed by too much control. Sleepless nights and daytime fatigue became her constant companions. Nights spent with Tyler were infrequent, and when they did occur, they offered no solace. Bethany tossed and turned, keeping him awake, which only aggravated his frustration. During the day, she sank deeper into apathy, avoiding conversations and steering clear of any discussions about the future. Those around them started to notice the growing internal tension. On October 23, 2012, things came to a head. Tyler found Bethany in the kitchen, holding a mug filled with windshield wiper fluid. He took the mug from her and called emergency services. When officers arrived, Bethany told them it was easier to die than to change. She was placed into custody for a psychiatric evaluation and transported to Truman Medical Center. Bethany explained to the staff that following Tyler's teachings, she had come to believe she was spiritually condemned and beyond saving, which had led her to thoughts of harming herself. When asked if she might try again, she answered affirmatively. She refused medication, including antidepressants. Despite the evident risk, Bethany was discharged 2 days later on October 25th. Tyler voiced his concerns about the danger of releasing her so soon, but his objections were dismissed. After her discharge, Bethy's condition worsened. Her sleeplessness increased, alternating with bouts of anxiety and profound apathy. She frequently spoke of having a broken soul and being on a path to destruction. She distanced herself from long conversations with friends, offering only brief responses and requesting they not press her with questions. Any attempts to discuss work, creative projects, or family were met with silence. She increasingly returned to the women's house, claiming she needed peace and rest. The overall situation painted a grim picture: a steep decline, isolation, sleepless nights, refusal of treatment, and constant remarks about harming herself. Bethany described her condition as religious fatalism, firmly believing she was trapped in an unchangeable fate. By the end of October, she appeared physically drained, and those around her saw no clear path toward recovery. The downward spiral showed no indication of halting. After Bethany was discharged from the hospital, Tyler instituted a new rule for the group. Members were prohibited from reaching out to her or offering any support. He argued that helping her only nourished her selfishness. For the group, his words were interpreted as a direct command. As a result, communication with Bethany ceased almost entirely. Her attempts to seek attention were disregarded, and any interaction with her became minimal and formal. On October 29, 2012, Tyler led another group meeting where he spoke about the necessity of renouncing selfishness for the sake of the mission. His tone was severe, almost accusatory. Though Bethy's name was never mentioned, the implication was clear. She sat off to the side, silent, and did not participate in the discussion. The lack of contact with her following the meeting further confirmed her isolation. The next morning, October 30th, Bethany visited the women's house. She left some of her belongings there, said goodbye, and when asked about work or future plans, simply replied, "I don't know." Shortly after, she left and did not return. Throughout the day, she did not appear at the men's house or along any of her usual routes. She sent no texts and made no calls. That evening, her absence was noticed, but no alarm was raised. As Tyler had stressed that she needed to walk her path alone, that was the last time anyone from the group saw her. What followed would only be revealed through official reports. Late that night, on October 30th, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office received a call regarding a suspicious vehicle parked at the Longview Lake recreation area. The caller reported that a beige minivan had been parked for an extended period in a poorly lit, remote section of the lot near the treeline. A patrol unit arrived around 9:40 p.m. and confirmed the vehicle was registered to Bethany, Deon. The van was locked from the inside and the windows were fully rolled up. There were no visible signs of damage. Through the glass, officers could see someone in the back seat. After forcing entry, they discovered the body of Bethany Deon on the third row of seats. A white plastic bag had been placed over her head and tied at the neck. On the floor beside her were 2 bottles of Tylenol PM, one empty and the other unopened. On the seat in front of her lay a handwritten note. Inside the vehicle, everything appeared to be in order. Bethy's personal belongings were neatly arranged on the front seat. There were no signs of a struggle, no visible injuries, and no blood. The initial police assessment suggested that the circumstances pointed to Bethany ending her own life. The note left behind carried strong religious themes. Bethany wrote that she felt doomed, that she saw no way out. Certain passages revealed guilt and a deep fear of eternal punishment. But what alarmed investigators was the handwriting. It did not match her usual neat, fluid script. The letters were uneven and shaky compared to her earlier writings. Friends and family who saw the document also remarked that the style and tone felt unlike her normal literary voice. The paper was sent for handwriting analysis. Police conducted a thorough forensic sweep of the vehicle. Technicians dusted for fingerprints and searched for biological evidence on the door handles, steering wheel, and seat belts. No DNA from other individuals was found inside the van. This led investigators to conclude that Bethany had been alone in the vehicle. The autopsy revealed that the cause of death was asphyxiation, combined with a significant amount of Tylenol PM in her system. The medical examiner noted that the combination of medication and suffocation indicated an intentional act rather than an accident. A few days later, the handwriting analysis confirmed that the note had indeed been written by Bethany. Experts suggested that the unusual appearance of the script could be attributed to extreme emotional distress and physical exhaustion at the time she wrote it. The theory of a forged note was officially ruled out. With all the evidence combined, investigators concluded that Bethany had taken her own life voluntarily. After the scene was processed, the vehicle was towed to a secure impound lot, and her body was transported to the county morgue. Her family was formally notified. To the outside world, the tragedy seemed to confirm the narrative of a desperate act carried out in solitude. However, on November 9, 2012, a man named Micah Moore walked into the Grandview Police Department, accompanied by 2 leaders from the International House of Prayer. He told the desk officer that he wanted to give a statement about Bethy's case and said, "I did it." The officer immediately notified detectives, and Moore was taken to an interview room, provided with a court-appointed attorney, and his statement was recorded. At first, he spoke haltingly. He was tense, his sentences fragmented, and he asked repeatedly for water. According to his account, for months before Bethy's death, men from the group's men's house had been secretly administering a potent, antipsychotic drug to her in liquid form, causing her to lose consciousness. During these episodes, Moore claimed several members engaged in sexual acts with her. He stated that these incidents were recorded on his iPad, and that some participants even wrote poems about what they had done. Moore further alleged that Tyler Deon was aware of what was happening, and referred to it as a religious experience. Moore went on to say that after Bethany began seeing a therapist and was in a position to disclose the abuse, the group feared exposure. He claimed that Tyler told him this has to be done, and that he was the one who could carry it out. Moore interpreted this as a direct order to eliminate Bethany before she could seek help or testify against the participants. Micah Moore told investigators that on the morning of October 30th, he met Bethany at Longview Lake. According to his statement, he gave her a liquid substance and then placed a plastic bag over her head, holding it there until she stopped breathing. After her death, he said he staged the scene to appear as self-harm, placing 2 bottles of Tylenol PM and a note inside the van. Moore also claimed that just days earlier, Tyler had allegedly described a dream in which he killed his wife by suffocation. Something Moore said he took as confirmation of what he was about to do. The men in the group, he said, feared prison and public scandal. They acted preemptively, believing they were following their leader instructions and protecting their brothers. Detectives pressed for further details: the time, the place, the origin of the substances in the plastic bag, and the knowledge of others involved. Moore maintained that he acted alone, but admitted that Tyler and several other men knew about what was happening. He also stated that his iPad, the device used to record the episodes, was still at their house. Based on these statements, the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office was notified. Bethy's funeral was delayed. Her body was retained for a second autopsy, and the case was reclassified as a possible homicide. A search warrant was issued for the group's house and for Moore's belongings. The leaders of IHOP, who had accompanied Moore to the police station, were questioned as witnesses about the events leading up to his confession. Moore's confession immediately triggered a media frenzy. By the next day, both local and national outlets were running sensational headlines about a cult, a sexual scandal, and a killing. Reporters crowded the Grandview police station and staked out homes in Grandview and Kansas City, seeking comments from neighbors and relatives. The focus quickly shifted not only to the confession itself, but to Tyler Deon's leadership role and his connection to the International House of Prayer, IHOP. IHOP responded immediately, issuing a statement that firmly denied any hidden, deviant, or cult-like practices associated with Tyler's circle. Deon was removed from all IHOP programs and banned from its facilities and events. The statement emphasized that the community operated independently and that its methods were not consistent with IHOP's principles or practices. This public distancing became the organization's official stance moving forward. The public outcry soon turned into action. Parents and relatives of the group's members rushed to Kansas City. Over the next few days, moving vans came and went from the rented houses in Grandview, and cars made constant trips to the airport and other states. Young people were taken home, some immediately, others after brief interviews with police. Alongside the departures, investigators conducted extensive questioning, carefully documenting names, dates of residence, access to rooms, and electronics. On November 14, 2012, the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office formally charged Micah Moore with first-degree murder. For the media, this was confirmation of the seriousness of his allegations. By the end of that week, both of the community's houses were nearly empty. Several members had left with their families, while others found temporary housing outside Tyler's circle. Former members of the group, once they had returned, don't forget to subscribe.